Times contributor and former House GOP Oversight Committee advisor. Okay, now, and also both of you fellas got the memo to wear purple ties. There we go. Kurt had some great comments about this in The Guardian. We read the column that quoted you extensively, so we begin with Scott Tranter. Do VP picks even matter?
Yes, because you raise money, you get earned media attention that you normally would have to pay for, but they can also be campaign resets. And I think that's kind of what that's what Donald Trump's looking for with that, is obviously make a splash, raise a lot of money, and potentially a campaign reset.
He could also talk to John McCain that they can be a real problem. Sarah Palin.
They can be, yes.
Cause some problems. We'll put the graphic up of the Apprentice VP series coming now. We had Celebrity Apprentice. Now we have VP Apprentice. Kurt, to you, is there any of these names that should scare Democrats?
No, not a single one of them should scare Democrats. I think what we all know about Donald Trump is that no matter who he selects, it's always just going to be the Trump show anyway. There is no scenario where the vice presidential candidate is going to in any way overshadow the top of the ticket. And so it's always going to be about Donald Trump. And that's what Democrats want. Democrats at least think that that's what they need to be successful in 2024. I think that if Trump were smart, another name that he should add to that list that would be really interesting is the mayor of Dallas, Eric Johnson, who went from being a Democrat, changing his party to being a Republican, something we don't see very often. Mayor of a big city, person of color, doing a great job on crime. That's right there in the Trump wheelhouse message.
The issue of a person of color, right? You're thinking Dallas mayor. You're also thinking Tim Scott, Ben Carson.
That's what the data thinks too.
That's what the data thinks too.
Yeah.
And then look, Donald Trump, for all of his foibles, has proven to be remarkably politically pragmatic. I'm thinking about the Mike Pence pick. He didn't want to pick Mike Pence. He didn't like him because he thought he was poor and hadn't done well in business and on and on and on. But he knew he brought evangelicals and that worked. Does the data, Scott, show that bringing a Tim Scott or a Ben Carson helps Donald Trump with black men?
Absolutely. Is it going to win him the segment? No. But Donald Trump needs to get 10, 15, maybe even high teens percentage for him to make a difference in states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. If he's able to do that there and claw away 3, 4, 5, 6% of that, and same thing with Hispanic voters too, he's suddenly competitive in a lot of these battleground states.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, though, Tim Scott, as of recording right now, is one of the senators not opposed to the immigration bill. We'll see what happens tomorrow. But that was one of the interesting things that, I looked at your list.
Well, just to piggyback on that, Scott's right. If Democrats lose...
Okay.
Get the quote.
I can't believe I just said that out loud.
Freudian slip. Continue.
If Democrats lose 5 to 10% of the black vote of what they had last time, I don't see a path for them to win. I think that's also the case in terms of when you look at the gender gap. Like if Trump were to pick an Elise Stefanik or a female, Kristi Noem, if that eats into the gender gap that Democrats are relying on, the only path Democrats have to win is to win with minorities, people of color, and women. If they lose any of that segment, they're screwed.
The name that we're not talking about and wasn't on the graphic.
Donald Trump Jr.
Laura Trump. Okay, we keep going. I'm still thinking about Nikki Haley, who talked about that. Take a listen.
Are you going to rule it out?
I don't play for second.
I knew you were going to say that.
It's offensive when anybody says that, she wants to be vice president.
But you're not going to rule it out because you're not going to rule it out.
It's not even a conversation.
Okay, so that's an old clip. She's since been much more Sherman-esque about it. But to that point, Kurt, look, Donald Trump is famous for needing the affirmation and support of people that he can't get, right? Once you turn and you start sucking up to him, he has no use for you.
Right.
And I'm wondering if Nikki Haley isn't actually sort of playing the smart game here.
I mean, you look at, let's see, Tim Scott. You look at people like Ron DeSantis, all of whom have eventually bent the knee. Nikki Haley's holding out. I think nothing would cause Trump more satisfaction than if he got her to bend the knee and to say, you know what, Donald Trump's the greatest thing of all time. I think he would relish that.
I'm going to give you the last 10 seconds. Greg Abbott, something to think about?
Yeah, Greg Abbott's certainly making headlines on all the right issues, right? Immigration's the number one issue. He's certainly fighting Joe Biden on that, going to make a name for himself. He was once thought of as a presidential candidate. He's young enough and he's got enough money. I mean, he's really making a name for himself and someone to watch.
Isn't he leading the rebellion against the union? I'm thinking there's like 6
people like that in Texas. Leading the rebellion? That's how you get 80%
I'm wondering if
of the
suburban
vote
women also don't view Greg Abbott as somebody who's a moderating force. Be interesting. Interesting to poll that. We'll do that.
That's what he was
If
like
only
when he
we
was a
knew
governor.
someone that could do polling.
Do polling.
I know.
See, there you go. That's why you guys keep coming back. All right, gentlemen, good to see you.